Has your COVID been like mine and suddenly you're just in athleisure all the time? Well, hello and welcome back. This week I am reviewing Matt Nagin's poetry collection, Notes from the Bonfire, partially inspired by COVID, partially inspired just by life. You guys, it's so good. By the way, if you hear heavy breathing, it's Lily, and I blame her. So, Notes from a Bonfire is an interesting piece where Matt Nagin basically just talks about life. He talks about how he feels during COVID. He talks about getting sick. He talks about all sorts of other stuff though too. There are poems just about so many different things, and they're all so emotive, and I loved it, you guys. We get a read about so many different aspects of Nagin's life, both before and during COVID. Like, some of it is intimate moments with his partner going to an abortion clinic. Some of it is reflecting on the time when he's in the hospital room with his mom and she's really, really sick. And other times it's something as simple as like your friend Jerry calling you up or sending you a letter or whatever, being like, hey, like, how's it going? And you're like, it's COVID, Jerry. It's crap. Like, I'm not in a good place. The world kind of sucks right now, but hey, I'm glad that you found a diet that works for you. Like, at least someone's thriving. And I think it's a very relatable feeling that a lot of these poems have. You know, I think to some degree, with a lot of poetry, and something that turns a lot of people off from it, is that poetry is very personal. Like, no matter how you come across it, no matter who writes it, to some degree, it's always them. Even when you're reading about the little red wagon, even though you're probably like, sometimes the little red wagon is just the little red wagon. Sometimes it isn't some deeper metaphorical meaning about childhood, even though, like, it probably is. Sometimes that little red wagon is just so much more. And you just don't get it. But with Notes from the Bonfire, even if you haven't necessarily been sitting next to someone's bedside while they can't breathe, we all knew to some degree what it was like. We all knew the annoying inconveniences of the masks. We all knew the frustrating grocery store runs where there was no toilet paper or no hand sanitizer. Like, we all got that. And that's what I think is just really beautiful about Nagin's work, is because it's just so relatable and it's so accessible. The other thing that I really liked about Nagin's work was just that it's very emotive, and even in those very vulnerable personal moments that you may or may not be able to like really empathize or sympathize with, the words just take you there. So you can imagine what it felt like. And the other thing with that too is that even though a lot of the poetry was very frustrated and came out of a place of frustration, and even Nagin says this at the beginning of his collection, because he includes an author's note, which I thought was great, there are moments of snark, like with Jerry, and being like, yeah, Jerry, life kind of sucks right now, but good for you. I think a lot of us had those moments, and sometimes maybe we even had those moments like talking to past versions of ourselves throughout the pandemic. Like, I know for me, the pandemic started really rough. I'm gonna be honest. There was one video where I'm sure you could probably figure that out. I went through a really terrible breakup, and right as I felt like I was super alone, the world shut down. So that was fun. But then I was like, you know what? I'm gonna overcome it. I'm gonna be great. I'm gonna like start doing yoga every day. I'm gonna like start doing walks every day. And for a while I was really, really good at it. And then I had a GI infection. It wasn't COVID, thankfully, but it took me out. And so then, like, kind of periodically ever since then, I was like, damn, beginning pandemic Hannah, like, Go you for being so optimistic and trying to be so positive despite everything that's going on. And then today, Hannah, who's vaccinated, who is a little bit salty about having to go back into the office, who is a little bit wary about jumping into the pre-COVID before times too quickly. She's like, damn right after you got sick with your GI infection, Hannah, like, you were down in the dumps. Same with the beginning of the pandemic, Hannah. I'm just kind of like, think about the positive things. Think about the kind of funny things. I was actually just talking to an old college professor of mine, and she said, just think about when you eventually write a memoir. What you've gone through in the past year sucks to live through, but looking back, you're gonna kind of laugh at some of the people that called in with their insane questions and their insane stories, like having to dig out of the trash can because you didn't know how to Uber Eats. Or you didn't know that there are some restaurants that are open 24 hours per day. You have to take that moment of self-reflexivity and be like, yes, the moment sucks, but like, maybe something good comes out of it. And I know that that sounds super preachy, and I know that that sounds really tangential and not quite about Notes from the Bonfire, but I still think it's relevant because that's the feeling that I got from reading Nagin's work. I could relate to his frustration. I could relate to his snark. I could relate, Lily, calm down. I could relate to the like random frustration of your pandemic puppy who's just like trying to dig for something that may or may not exist. Like, I think for a lot of us, COVID consumed our lives for the past year. And I'm not saying that it wasn't a big deal, because it 100% is. I just said that I'm a little bit nervous about the states just jumping into the before times again and acting like nothing ever happened. But at the same time, there have been a lot of good things that have come out of it. And I think that little glimmer of hope is often present in Nagin's poetry, even in some of the most frustrated and like negatively emotive ones. There's still that moment where maybe it's not quite positivity, but it's like maybe things aren't quite as bleak as they seem. Even if they really, really, really suck right now. Like, I haven't lost a parent, but I have lost family, and that's always really tough. But like, even as you're sitting there worried about what's gonna happen, it's kind of like Gone with the Wind. It's like tomorrow is another day. And like maybe tomorrow will suck a little bit too, but you know that eventually things will probably suck a little bit less, because especially with COVID, you know that everyone's going through the same thing. This is not one of those situations where you're like, oh my gosh, why is everything happening to me? I'm the only one feeling this way. Like, no, you're not. And I think that's why I love Notes from the Bonfire, because it was just so relatable, and I think that Nagin put into words a lot of the very complex, multi-layered feelings that a lot of us felt throughout the pandemic. And so for those reasons, that it's well written, that it's entertaining, that it's relatable, mostly that it's relatable, it's a really great collection of poetry, and I really think that you should check it out. So that's all that I have for Notes from the Bonfire. Next week, I am partnering with Inkberry Books once more. I'll be reviewing Kim Triedman's The Other Room. It seems really exciting. It's supposed to be about this couple. One is a surgeon and one is an editor, so woot woot writing community. They had a son who mysteriously died, and now they're both coping with it in their own ways. So I'm only a couple pages in. I'm really excited to get back to you with some more of my thoughts. So, in the meantime, thanks so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you next time. Happy reading, and thanks.